Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Rabid Dog's House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems with a little bit of bite. I'm your host, Justin Steele, and tonight we are going to discuss 1994's Wolf, directed by Mike Nichols and starring Jack Nicholson, Michelle Pfeiffer, James Spader, and Christopher Plummer. Wolf follows Will Randall, a senior editor at a publishing firm whose career is in jeopardy after a recent company takeover. Will is a kind man, but his noble qualities are often taken for granted. Driving late one snowy night, Will accidentally hits a wolf with his car, and after being bitten, Will is slowly taking on wolfish qualities that brings out his more assertive side. Unfortunately, his transformation is not only affecting his personality, and he finds that his recent gift might be more of a curse. He seeks help from Laura Alden, his boss's daughter, and is desperate to not succumb to the more dangerous nature of his new wolfish personality. Wolf is a stylish look at the werewolf genre that delivers on the typical tropes but centers on more mature themes. The film deftly balances between expected gore and highbrow metaphors of the werewolf within us all. Wolf is for the horror fan that enjoys the werewolf subgenre, strong characters, and a terrific looking film. Also joining me tonight is my amazing co-host, Zena Dixon. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems with a little bit of bite. Please welcome Zena Dixon, the real queen of horror, my fabulous co-host. How you doing tonight, Zena?
Justin, hi. I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, doing well. Really thrilled to discuss 1994's Wolf with you. As usual, we'll start off with our non-spoiler reviews, and then we will dip in a little bit later into spoiler reviews. But, I'll just say coming into this was a movie that I've been watching since I was a kid. My dad was a big fan of Jack Nicholson, is a big fan. And, I remember him being super excited to watch this movie. He had rented it from the video store, and I just thought it was great. I had no real concept. I was too young to really get, all the more mature themes or the workplace politics and battles, but I could appreciate the look of it, the feel of it. I love the performances in it. I think we have a super strong cast, especially led by Jack Nicholson and Michelle Pfeiffer. This is now actually the third werewolf movie that we are discussing on the show. Our first episode together was Cursed. Then we discussed Silver Bullet last summer, and now we're discussing Wolf. And it's so funny. I enjoy werewolf movies, but they're not my favorite genre. But I think it's funny that we've discussed werewolf movies probably more than any specific genre on this, other than maybe just 90s thrillers in general, which this would also fit into. And,
Yeah.
but no, I just love this movie. I think, Silver Bullet is that young perspective. It's more traditional, what we think of when we're kids as werewolves. I think Cursed has that sort of teen, young adult feel, a little bit more hip. And then Wolf has that very mature theme. At the time, critics weren't, they were a bit mixed on the reviews with this. It was like a tug of war. They either wanted more of the metaphor and less of the genre tropes, or the genre fans wanted more of the werewolf gore transformation stuff and less of the metaphor. But I kind of dig it. I think that makes this movie a little bit more special. It definitely follows the regular tropes of the werewolf subgenre of horror, if you will. It doesn't lean too heavily on the transformation aspect, but I also kind of like that about it, that he just kind of is when he becomes the werewolf. Although I don't think they even once in this movie say werewolf. It's demon wolf, or he's just
Yeah.
becoming the wolf. But it's a werewolf movie. Who are we kidding? And I just think that it's nice that it follows those. It does that sort of balance of you don't want to be weak and too passive in life, but you also don't want to become a monster either. And that's what I think most werewolf movies are about. It's, if you want to look at it from an academic perspective, it's about, hey, don't become the monster part of it. And
Mhm.
this movie really balances that because the character played by Jack Nicholson of Will Randall, he has to find that balance. You know, he
Yeah.
can't, he's pretty much walked all over in his life and he needs to be a little bit more assertive.
Mhm.
And the werewolf, the wolf within is allowing that to happen. And that's obviously juxtapositioned by James Spader's character
Mhm.
and the balance of Michelle Pfeiffer. But those are my initial thoughts going in. I just love this movie. I think people that are, I think they should definitely give it a second look. The 90s, especially the early 90s, was definitely a little bit more of a cynical time when it came to film. I think we had just come out of the 80s. Horror fans were used to the over-the-top slashers or, these big gory effects, and to have a more slick look, I don't think they were quite ready for yet. On the flip side, those cinephiles of the Siskel and Ebert time frame, they were a little bit more cynical about film, and so I think they couldn't find the joy that was in this movie that is in this movie. It's tongue
Mhm.
in cheek. It has a lot of in jokes, funny moments, which we'll get into. But Zena, I believe this was your first time watching Wolf. Tell me, please, what did you think about it?
Oh my God. Okay, so I think I might have seen bits and pieces of it because there were some things that I found very familiar, which we'll get into. So like I've seen it before, but I think that I was too young and it probably just went over my head. But I didn't watch the movie fully, completely until recently, until like last week actually. So this movie is just so seriously one of the best werewolf movies I've ever seen. So what's funny is that I really love werewolf movies. I don't feel like we have enough of them. And even when it comes to it, because when it comes to werewolves, like the transformation, that it seemed like that would be really expensive to do, which is understandable. But I feel like for this movie to be made in 1994, that's almost 30 years ago, depending on what, if not 30 years ago, that this movie came out, and it still holds up. Like
It really
I
does.
it's beautiful. I love like the vibe of it. I love the opening. I love the music. I love the performances. I love the storyline. I love the fact that it is a werewolf movie, but it has like a different tone. It has like a serious tone to it. And on top of that, with the main character, Will Randall, played by Jack Nicholson, which I love Jack Nicholson. I think that he's just such an amazing actor. I love seeing him on screen, and this is like the first time I've ever seen him as a. I'm pretty sure he's played a meek character before, but I've never seen a meek Jack Nicholson. And it's like you kind of felt for this guy because not only as the viewers we are getting a middle-aged man who's very much in his career. He just seemed like he's a very low-key guy who's into his career. He loves his wife and he goes to work like he has a very calming life. Everything changes when he's bitten. But honestly, I think that we'll get into it, but I think it's for the best. But seriously, this is one of like the top werewolf movies I've ever seen. It still gave me like the I don't want to say like the blood and gore because there's really no blood and gore, but it was satisfying because
Yeah.
it still felt like a horror movie. It's like a classy werewolf story. You know what I mean? And it felt very much 90s with the music. There was some saxophone music in there. And I
Yeah.
don't know if I ever told you, like, I have a thing for saxophone music.
Nice. No, you haven't. And I love it because I do too. I
You
love
do?
it.
Oh
Yes,
my God. Okay.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
you
Okay.
don't
So,
hear it a lot in like the horror genre at all, just saying.
yeah.
Or not
And
enough.
I mean, I feel like they need to bring it back. They need to bring
Totally.
it back, But
Totally.
no, seriously, this is like it's just such an awesome movie. And so I watched it once, and then I decided to rewatch it again, just so I, to see how I felt about it. And it's one of those kind of movies where it's like it's literally better the second time around. Like I cannot wait to rewatch it. I'm pretty sure that if I would have watched it as a kid, I would have loved it. But it does have like a which you did tell me, it does have like a slower tone, like it is like a slower movie. And I think that at the time, like I said, what in 94 I was 7, so I don't think that my little brain could have
For
could have
sure.
grasped onto that. But I'm pretty sure that if I would have watched it, especially leading up to it, like there's so many favorite parts that we're going to talk about, but I'm positive that I would have loved it as a kid.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that you enjoyed the movie. I mean, I figured you would, but it's always nerve-wracking to like suggest something. But from here on out, everybody, spoilers, spoilers. If you haven't
Yes.
seen the movie, go watch it, come back and finish this. But I think we can safely say Zena and I agree. We love this movie. It is a
Yes.
good one. We recommend it. So many things to unpack. I would love to start, I think, with the look of the film and maybe dip into the performances because I just think the cinematography is fantastic. I think the look of it, there's like, I don't know, there's just a quality about it where
Mhm.
the look of it aids the heightened senses that Jack Nicholson's character and later on James Spader, you can almost feel it. It's like
Yeah.
the look of it's almost like pulsating off of the film. And the music, yes, I love that sort of. I do love the saxophone, but I really, really love the moments where it's sort of like I'm never going to be able to like mimic it, but it's like there's like a
Yes.
little that kind of goes, and I just when that happens, I'm like just falling more in love with the movie because I do also enjoy werewolf movies. Like I said, they're not my favorite, like that's
Mhm.
not my go-to, but I always enjoy it. And I did want to tell you, and I don't know if I ever have, the when we first discussed Cursed, we had talked about some of our favorite werewolf movies, and I had never seen Bad Moon, and I watched it right after we filmed that episode because you recommended it.
Mhm.
And I love that movie too. And that movie
Yeah.
came out at just about the same time.
Mhm.
And I would say, Bad Moon had more of he's the traditional, he seemed like a decent guy, but the werewolf is definitely more evil.
Yeah.
And, whereas this, it's that sort of balance. But I think that is just as pleasing of a werewolf movie. So I've
Mhm.
always wanted to say thank you for recommending it because I probably never would have watched it. And I remembered as a kid seeing it in the video store thing and not picking it up. But Bad Moon is also a great one. But this movie too, I mean, whereas Bad Moon again has more traditional look,
Mhm.
sound, feel, this movie definitely elevates. It's trying to be an elevated horror movie, and I
Yeah.
think that it succeeds on many levels, and that leads to the performances.
Mhm.
Jack Nicholson, like you said, I also don't really recall. He's such an over the top personality. I don't really recall many movies where he's sort of meek or a little more tame, which is, funny that he would be in this werewolf movie. You really get to see you would expect he has those wolfish qualities, Jack Nicholson in
Yeah.
general, who I believe I share the same eyebrows with, and I think that might be also why my
Wow, that's so cool.
I think that's why my dad likes him so much. But yeah, he's such an interesting character. He loves his wife. He's faithful. He's genuinely portrayed by her actions, and
Mhm.
I just think that the arc that he goes on throughout the movie, because of Jack Nicholson's performance, really makes the film more heartbreaking in the end.
I agree with everything that you said. It's a beautiful movie. And that's how you know, like, the cinematography is on point. This movie was made in 1994 and it
Right.
still looks gorgeous. It does not look dated, like, at all. And then Jack Nicholson, he's just awesome. We agree on that
Yes.
with his performance. So it's just kind of like, if you want to see him in a different kind of role, like, I was not expecting this. I thought that he was going to be like, the star of the office type of thing. Like, he's on top. His wife is just so in love with him. Ladies want to be with him. And I really did believe the character Stewart at first. At first, but knowing, James Spader, because he's always playing that guy, I was like, but we're gonna get into it. But there's something that like blew my mind that I did not see coming, that I literally screamed when they revealed. So Will's wife, is it Charlotte?
Yeah.
Charlotte was cheating on
Yeah.
Will with
Yeah.
Stewart, and I did not see it coming. But I kind of I felt that he was gonna find her with a man, like cheating on a man, or whatever, because he was like sniffing her jacket and stuff, and his little growls. He sounds so cool as a werewolf, But no, yeah, when he was sniffing her jacket and then he just went running down the street, I was like, oh man, he's gonna find her with a man. And then it's just like when I saw that it was Stewart or James Spader's character, I literally screamed and I had to like rewind it back because did I see that correctly? Because it was like a shocker, because
Yeah.
I didn't pick up on the vibes at all when they were at Will's boss's house, at that party. She seemed super supportive, and not saying that she's not. Like, I just didn't. She was so upset about him basically getting demoted and Stewart getting the position. Then Stewart, he seemed like such a suck up, but he seemed like he was there for Will, like he actually cared. Like there's no way. And then when you think about it, it's just that's the kind of game that he played, type of thing. And then his wife, and not trying to say it was okay, she probably was just having a moment, you know. I don't know, maybe she received attention, and not that I'm blaming Will at all, because he did not deserve that, but I think that maybe that played into how he was before. Maybe he was just very passive about a lot of things, and it just seemed like literally the night before he found out, you know, they got it on, you know, and he was growling, and you know, since he had his werewolf type of thing, it gave him that spice. But unfortunately, yeah, Charlotte, she wanted to taste other flavors.
Yeah, that she sure did. Yeah, I think that goes hand in hand with what you were saying before at first about, you know, the second time viewing, you're going to catch a little bit more.
Mhm.
And yeah, the first time I saw it too, certainly didn't, you know, have any clue. And when I watch it now, though, I notice like little moments, like at the party where at, you know, Mr. Alden's party or whatever his name is, you know, they're kind of together, Charlotte and Stewart, and then in the car, she's sort of is like, he didn't tell me that you were fired, or I had no idea that you were going to be fired. And, you know, Will is sort of like, well, why would you know,
Yeah.
and then kind of goes. And so I love that it's not obvious in any way, because she seems genuinely in shock. So you just are like, well, maybe she's just spitballing, just talking. But I do love that all those hints are there leading up to it. And yeah, I think it's an interesting, well, I think you bring up an interesting point, because it does seem like Will was losing his spark in life. And while he most certainly did not deserve to have that happen to him, I'm sure it did affect not only his, you know, relationships at work, but his relationship with his wife. I mean, if you see how when he goes into the office and stuff, you know, he's got his routine. He's very, you know, very standard at what he does. He goes in though, and you know, his secretary and his other friend are like David Hyde Pierce's character are just talking,
Yeah.
but he goes and he makes David Hyde Pierce's character a cup of coffee. Like he doesn't pour himself a coffee first. He literally like pours coffee and goes and hands it to his friend. He's so passive, so
Yeah.
this, so you can understand, you know, that probably affected a lot of things. And then just the night before, yeah, he gets a spark back, but too little too late, because she's already strayed. She shouldn't have. But it
Yeah.
does also go with what you're saying. And I want to definitely dive into James Spader's personality. But yeah, James Spader has really made a career of playing these sort of characters, you know, sort of the jerk, the good looking preppy guy who kind of will stab you in the back ever since, you know, Pretty in Pink days. And I think like, and he's always had that feathered hair, but even his character in like a movie like Sex, Lies, and Videotape, he's sort of the anti-hero or the protagonist of the film. But even that, he's still kind of like creepy in his own way, and you know, antagonistic. And it's all culminated in this movie Wolf, where he really shines, and he's kind of terrifying, you know. We'll get to the end when we get to the end, but I just think that the positions of those two characters are so interesting. And then you throw Michelle Pfeiffer into this mix, and I love that it's sort of the way this movie is so well crafted, and it is well crafted. But the screenwriter, I guess, you know, wrote this movie. Jack Nicholson was brought on board, but Jack Nicholson's contract pretty much stated that he got to pick the director. Well, he picked Mike Nichols, and Mike Nichols had done quite a few things before this and was definitely up and coming. But Mike Nichols kind of changed a lot with the script, and therefore the screenwriter, who was happy about Jack Nicholson, it kind of came back to bite him, because Jack Nicholson picked Mike Nichols, who changed the script. So there was a lot of things that had changed, and we are going to talk about, obviously, the ending. We'll talk about because there's sort of two schools of thought on what actually what Michelle Pfeiffer's role was from either the beginning of the movie, or is this just something that happened to her at the end. But I do want to speak to Michelle Pfeiffer to just say, because her character, the reason I brought the script is her character was one that was changed probably the most in the script. She started off as a very damsel in distress, you know, typical
Yeah.
female woman character. But, you know, bringing Michelle Pfeiffer into this role, you're going to have a little bit more you're going to have to do with it because of that caliber of acting. And, you know, I think it's a fun side note, too, that Michelle Pfeiffer and Jack Nicholson were just coming off of being two of the best all-time Batman villains, the Joker and Catwoman, you know, to have them as a sort of reunited in this movie, as
Yeah.
well as Richard Jenkins, who plays the cop investigator in this movie.
Oh
It's
yeah.
also a Witches of Eastwick reunion because Michelle Pfeiffer, and Jack Nicholson were all in Witches of Eastwick together as well. So you could tell that they're familiar with each other. But
Yeah.
I love Michelle Pfeiffer's character of Laura Alden. She's mysterious. She's pragmatic. She's very blunt. I love,
Mhm.
love, love the moment when Jack Nicholson kind of like calls her out or is, trying to charm her by being blunt and like, you're very hostile. You're beautiful, but you're hostile and you're no guarded and blah, blah, blah. And in any other movie with any other character, that would be the thing that sort of charms Laura or Michelle Pfeiffer. But Michelle Pfeiffer believably gives it right back where she's like, sorry, wrong line. I don't know if you meant to challenge me here, but it didn't work. And I just
Yeah.
love that. I love that she can stand right up to Jack Nicholson, who at that time was Jack Nicholson. Michelle Pfeiffer had been doing quite a bit since then. But she took the role because she got to be herself, pretty much. She said she wasn't going to be doing any whips, chains, or anything. She doesn't have to wear any wigs because she'd either been doing pretty much period dramas or
Yeah.
stuff like Batman.
With James Spader, I knew that he was going to be a jerk. He fooled me a little bit, but then it's just like, there it is. It came out right away. But it's just like he's such a great performer, and there is just something about him where it's like he really does take that role there. And his whole reasoning, which we're going to talk about it at the end, it's just kind of like for a job, like he was
Right.
going that hard for a job, but he just wanted to ruin, like seriously ruin Will for some reason. It's like you took his wife, you took the job, like you just want to ruin his life. So as it goes with Michelle Pfeiffer's character, Laura, like you said, you described her perfectly. I love her so much. I love that she's strong, and I love that she's mysterious. We know that she is a very well-off woman. She notices things about Will, like she knew, like, okay, the horses don't really care for him, So it's like, if you know that, why would you come there? Which is that's a good question. I would ask that too. Every single time you come around, like they're like freaking out. So you're the problem. Do not come near them like that. And I love that exchange as well, where he was trying to be witty with her, and she was just not having it at all.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that it wasn't like some cutesy moment, because I was thinking to myself, like, well, why would he say that? Like, that would not impress me at all. So, but yeah, I also, her wardrobe, I know it's like the early 90s. Whoa, those are some great outfits that she was wearing. But anyway, I love seeing her on screen in general. I just love her so much. And she was perfect for this role. And that makes a lot of sense with what you said, that she said that she was able to be herself. She seemed very much like Laura, like I felt like it was believable, but I like the fact that she actually had a personality. She had something to say.
She's heard it all and she's seen it all. And what she finds attractive about him is that he is a genuinely kind person.
Right.
And she's, because it was, like I said, at the early 90s, this was a very common theme at that time in film, that we, this sort of neo-noir film era of like things are just bleak and not a dystopia, but definitely things are cynical and dark. And so that would be attractive when everything you're used to seeing is so bleak, to see somebody who's kind of optimistic or tries to believe the best in people. I like that sort of challenges her in an non-traditional way.
Right.
I would like to talk about the effects in this, though. I do think they do a wonderful job. Werewolf movies tend to be known for their effects, for how well each one does the transformation. I mean, from American Werewolf in London to The Howling to Silver Bullet, it's always about like sort of the transformation. Now in this film, obviously there are transformations, but they're done subtly. It's about almost like it's more focused on the beginning of the transformation and the end of the transformation, but you have little moments like Jack Nicholson in The Office where his ears are kind of perking up as he's hearing all the conversations, but you could see his ears actually like moving like a wolf or a dog's ears would. Or then you have the other side of it where he has transformed and he's running through the woods, hunting, and he's on the hunt and he finds this deer, and it's just the look in his eyes and his face and the way the blood is. It's like watching art in a way, in my opinion. And I love that about horror movies. It's, again, everybody comes to horror for different reasons. And I think we sometimes get the horror community, if you will, gets, sidetracked with like, oh, a horror movie's got to be this. But I just always think there's so much to celebrate. And one thing that I love is when a horror movie isn't just art for the sake of art, but naturally becomes that. And the way this film comes together really does that. Or in the moments with the zoo where you have, David Schwimmer. I love that too, sprinkled throughout are just these actors that we've seen. But David
Yes.
Schwimmer as a cop was just, it cracks me up. But even like the leaps in this movie,
Hmm.
and it really all comes together for the finale. But when he's like leaping over the cages at the zoo or through the woods, I just think it's the way the movie's filmed that makes it work as opposed to other werewolf movies where the focus is really centered on how do they transform on screen, about it being on camera and we see the effects happening. This movie's not really about that. This movie's more about trying to make a point to say something about the character of
Hmm.
Will or about who we are as people to each
Yeah.
other. But what do you think about the effects? Did you like that way of doing it? Would you have preferred maybe to see more on there? Again, it's not a very gory movie, but I think there's definitely that aspect there.
Mhm.
It's just not shooting at your face,
Right. I'm not gonna lie, I'm curious how the movie would be if it was way more gorier. I
Hmm.
think that I love gore, but I think that it would probably take away from the story. And I think that that's something that they were trying to focus on. I would never dismiss, more gore. But
Sure.
honestly, I love the way, like you said, it's kind of subtle. Like it's not like bam right in your face. Kind of like because it came out around the same time, Bad Mood. It's not like that, But it doesn't mean that it's not a bad movie, and it doesn't mean that it's less of a werewolf movie. It's just
Right.
has a different tone, So, and it's I like the way the effects are because this is something that I've never seen before. And truth be told, like I said, I'm all for the gore. This is the kind of movie that I feel like I can rewatch over and over again and not get tired of. Like
Yeah.
you'll see something new. And then again, like it's hard to explain, but I feel like you know what I'm talking about because you said it first. You like the feel of this movie, the vibe of it, like the beginning, like the opening credits as an example. It's just there's just something about this movie that is so good. Like you ever start a movie and it's just the opening credits and it's like you're gonna like it. You just get that feeling, and that's how I feel with this movie. So when it comes to like with the effects, it's something different and something that we haven't received, especially when you think about the movies from the 80s, like Silver Bullet, The Howling, American Werewolf in London. You know what I mean? When you think about those movies, it's different from this one. But I feel like it gave us something different. I think that it works for this movie. I feel like it's a classy werewolf movie. So if this is something that you want to show someone who say if they're not really into horror or they get a little bit squeamish, this is the perfect movie to show them.
But yeah, focusing on like James Spader's character, I think, yes, as we said, he's made this sort of career out of this character. But I do like that he is a believable people pleaser. Even the things he's saying, he knows. Like he says to Will, do you want me to resign right now? What do you want me to do?
Mhm.
I'll do it. And then,
Yeah,
Will lets him get away with that a couple times, then finally calls him out. He's like, resign.
yeah.
And he's like, I'm not, well, I can't do that. And he's like, so why did I say it?
Yeah,
And
I laughed.
that, and I think that almost makes him more of a true villain in the fact that he thinks he's doing good things. He says, I'm the best thing this office has,
Mhm.
this company has. I think he genuinely believes he's the hero of the story.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes sometimes the most dangerous kind of villain. And
Yes.
yeah, and I think that James Spader can play that probably better than most,
Mhm.
because he does walk that line. All that he does leading up to the ending too, where you have at the police station with Laura, and it's so tense, and his eyes now kind of bridging to the effects. His eyes, they're so creepy. He almost looks blind, and maybe he was by the contacts, but it works. I don't know if
Mhm.
it was intentional or not, but the way he stares at her, where he even kind of sniffs her, and she's
Yeah.
like, luckily, Laura is jaded enough to know that there are crazy men out there, but she's also smart enough to realize, wait, maybe what Will has been saying is true. This
Exactly.
guy is maybe a wolf now. So she knows to play that line, like flirting with him, to keep him appeased and
Mhm.
so that he doesn't just do something insane. Before I forget, though, I do love the ultimate moment. Also, for me, my other favorite moment is James Spader and Jack Nicholson in the bathroom when Jack Nicholson is marking his territory.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I just think that's such a great moment because it's sort of the midpoint of the movie where Will has finally, he's into his own. He's outwitted. He's been outwitted, but he is outwitted even better for his own
Yeah.
win in this moment. And you feel that for him. You're excited. Again, the werewolf tropes, it's always about finding that balance. The idea from an academic standpoint of werewolf movies is that you don't want to become this monster. And he does have to walk that line. He doesn't want to become a monster, but you shouldn't be walked all over either. So we cheer for him in these moments. But we've also seen him attack people. But I do love in that moment, he finally is like marking his territory, which, puts James Spader into a spin. But it all leads to this moment at the police station leading to the barn. And I love that the whole ending is played in slow motion.
Yes.
I feel like there were criticisms about that, but I love it. That gives me so many chills from the moment where Laura, James Spader burst in there. He runs over a security guard, attacks another security guard. He says some crazy stuff about Laura to this guard, to her. And, how do you, as Laura, as Michelle Pfeiffer, stand there and I would be stunned. I wouldn't know how to react, but she keeps her cool, kicks him in the balls, runs in. But from that moment on, it's this almost ballet. Or, it's like watching a musical or a show, like all this it's very choreographed, but not like in an obvious way, but in a beautiful artistic way. And you have these leaps, the way that he's, trying to rape Laura. I mean, it's horrifying, but it's all like coming together to build up to this moment where Jack Nicholson has to decide, is he going to be a wolf and save her, but he's now damned, or does he let this happen? And he's going to make the right choice. It's Will. It's Jack Nicholson's character. Leaps over, but that whole sequence, I just love it. It makes the whole rest of the movie. I don't know how you could come away thinking this is a boring movie or anything after you find that ending and how it all plays out.
When Will discovers that Stewart is sleeping with his wife and he bites him, I'm like, oh no, that means he's going to turn. And then honestly, I didn't really notice his bandages on his hand until the second time around. And so then when I watched it that first time and I saw that his eyes were changed at the police station, I was like, oh my God, like, does he really wanted that job?
Yeah, right.
Kind of like what you said. That's what makes him even like far worse than like any other villain, because he thinks that he's a good person. He doesn't think that there's anything wrong with him at all. And I'm pretty sure that he probably even justified why he was sleeping with Charlotte, like he probably just had all these reasons. And even with him taking the job and like you said, like that bathroom scene, that's one of the scenes that I remembered. I remember him peeing on his leg. I remember that scene. And then I remember when I was a kid, I was watching, it was Will and Stewart fighting in the barn. And like you said, it was in slow motion, but I was hooked. I remember watching that because I remember the ending, it all just came back to me when I watched it, So that to me speaks volumes. And like you said, there's no way that you could say that this movie is boring. Like where, how? I don't believe it. So there's that. But Stewart, man, like he just went on a rampage. Like once they revealed his eyes, I knew that he's the one that killed Charlotte.
Yeah.
Just so he can try to just blame it on Will, because he wanted back his job. I mean, I believed his performance. If I was one of the police officers, I would believe him too, because that does make a lot of sense. Will finds out that she was sleeping with his wife. I mean, seems like a reason, And then the fact that Laura was there to talk, it would have just been like the nail on the coffin type of thing. So I love the fact that he just went speeding down the road. He made it back at her house with record time. And like you said, talking crazy to the security guard. I loved when he ran, that sounds messed up, but when he ran over the security guard. And I was thinking to myself, to the security guard, don't stand in front of the car.
Right.
Just move to the side and then call the cops, you'll be safe. But so if you're looking for like fast-paced, bloody type of thing, all within those like next 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, things get crazy. So it's like, I absolutely love the ending with it. I love how Stewart just became a madman. It kind of felt like This movie kind of felt like a movie from the 40s, but it
Yes.
also kind of, yeah, like where it's just kind of like the whole vibe, but then it also felt like a, you know, like a monster, universal monster movie,
Yes.
you know, with that ending, because it is very much in your face type of thing. And like it just went from 0 to 100 type of thing. And the way that Will, which I knew that he was going to like defend Laura, the way that he did defend her, like, and it's just like the fact that you were trying to do that right in front of Will, like, then you he was probably going to kill her afterwards and then blame him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just like he's a true psychopath. The thing with Laura, did she got scratched or she was bit at a certain point?
Okay, so we'll go into it. So
Okay.
this is the final. So you have the final twist. I just want to say real quick that the finale is ultimately the old wolf versus the new wolf, and
Mhm.
they both are evenly matched. The young wolf, though, is a bit more cocky. And like you said, he was going to do this right in front of Will. There's that moment where his head sort of like turns and he's like, "How you doing, Chief?" And it's super creepy and weird,
Yeah.
and I love it. Horrified the whole time, but it's such a crazy scene, which I love that ultimately, even though it is between the old wolf and the new wolf,
Mhm.
it's Laura that even though she's been rescued, she still comes in at the end and she's the one that shoots
Yeah.
he shoots Stewart. I
Love
love
that.
that it's not just her and a damsel in distress. She still comes out to be an active character because she's been this great character the whole movie. I don't want it to just be she's a damsel in distress. I like that she's still empowered in the end. But that's the question. So there's two theories that kind of are out there, and one that people vehemently do not like, but I think it's kind of the true. I think it's what really happened versus this is what people assume happened. And
Okay.
I'm fine with either way. I think there is just as much supporting evidence for either option as well as flaws with both options. But it basically comes down to, was she maybe a werewolf the whole time? And is she possibly the werewolf that bit him? Or was she somehow scratched in the battle? Or was it during her making love with Will that it was past, fluids? We have that doctor
Mhm.
guy who was sort of a shaman type who
Yeah.
wanted Will to bite him. He basically says in the film, we're 25,000 years out of the jungle. And he's basically saying there's a lot we don't know. There's a lot we are just learning. And that is going to make my point for one of these arguments.
Mhm.
But basically, it doesn't have to necessarily be a bite. We don't know. And because again, and that's what I also like about this movie. It's a classy movie. It's a smart, intelligent movie, but it doesn't necessarily answer everything. Now, I think that it's possible she was a werewolf the whole time, if not the werewolf that bit him or among that pack.
Mhm.
And my main idea for that is it happens very fast because it's that same night. Then that she's all of a sudden she didn't like transform or anything, but right after this, like an hour after the events of the climax, all of a sudden she has these. She's
Yeah.
developing pretty quick, if you ask me. But I do think there's an argument to be made that that is what happened. She is now just becoming a wolf. But if you notice in that scene when she's calling out the police officer and she's basically like, "Do you want another vodka tonic?" He's like, "How did she smell that?" And then she's, because she's like 20 feet
Yeah.
away and she's like, she could not possibly hear that. But she's like, "How I could smell your breath from here." And the shot goes to her father, and her father, Christopher Plummer, a great, great actor, he sort of gives this look like, like he knows.
He
How would he
did.
know? How would he know what's going on at all unless he was maybe a werewolf? And at the beginning of the film, when you see when you see the wolves at the beginning of the film, there's two wolves. It comes down in two wolves. It looks like the one that was bit, as well as this wolf with like this grayness,
Mhm.
which makes me think of an older man who has gray
Yes.
hair. So I think it's very possible that they are wolves. And like we said, the people that I'm ready for you out there. The people out there that are like, "Oh, well, they didn't have any symptoms. They weren't affected by the full moon." Well, like the doctor shaman guy said, we're still learning. We don't know
Mhm.
everything. Or maybe some people have learned already.
Right.
Maybe Laura and her father have it under control. They're able to control their symptoms. They're able to like not just transform at will. And I think, if you watch, so that would ask the question, well, why was she so scared throughout the movie? Why was she like worried it was Will? I don't think she was worried about him becoming a wolf. I think she was worried that he was maybe a murderer, which is why she
Exactly. Yeah.
and and she wanted him to become a wolf, but she wanted to make sure it was going to be like her true love. She's probably done this before, and she's like,
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was going to be the guy. Nope, he's a wolf. Or not, no, he's a murderer. But then she realized, nope, this is him. She can love Will. This is her
Mm-hmm.
true love. And so that's what she was upset about. That's why she was so scared. If you look at her throughout the rest of this movie, she's basically like the first time she talks to Will, he drinks the drink, the brandy, and she's like, good dog, good dog. Why would she say that? And then
Yeah.
she's like, oh, this is where I used to go to bury all my pets. Girl, how many pets did you have that you needed to be burying? Or were you a young wolf killing all these little
Exactly. Yeah.
animals and burying them there? Girl, come on. So she's like, this is where I used to bury all my pets. I think I had one. I had several pets as a kid, but there was one I remember burying. Anyway, so, and then the rest of the movie, because at one point he's like in bed when she's going to make him breakfast the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I don't know where I'm going. He's all nervous. I don't know where I'm going. She's like, you're going to a good place. Like she knows.
Yeah.
Like she is like, listen, you're cool. I think I love you. And listen, we're going to be okay. That's what I think. Now, of course,
Mm-hmm.
there's the alternate theory, which is at some point she was infected. This is all new to her. She has no idea what's going on. I don't know why her father would be chuckling so knowingly
Yeah.
at the end there. But I think it works too. And I will say that I think that that was more the intention of the original script, which I have not read, but there was a different ending filmed. Test audiences did not like it, so they changed it more to this direct ending. I think, again, that's still unclear too, but there was an ending for sure filmed where the climax happens, he runs off into the forest, and she later on is flown in by helicopter to this area where she still goes to visit him to make sure he's okay in his wolf form. So that would imply she's not a werewolf. So I don't think it was necessarily the original intent
Mm-hmm.
of the film. But I think also too, to support, why is she so upset then to see him in his wolf form? I think it's because she knows he's now gone to the point of no return, that he's never going to be able to be a human again, that he's
Yeah.
now a wolf. And that's what she's upset about, because she wanted to maybe train him as she is to be human most of the time. Like you said earlier about the animals, like, hey, you know that animals don't like you while you're around them,
Mm-hmm.
because she knows animals do like her. It's not necessarily, or people will argue out there, well, if they didn't like him as a wolf, why would they like her as a wolf? People, not
Yeah.
everybody's the same. Not every
Exactly.
character is the same. Not every wolf is the same. Not every, like, people always want to see that. Like, it just makes me crazy. Because I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking of the Alien movies when they're like, people are so stupid. You don't know. People don't know they're in a horror movie. People
Yeah.
don't know. These characters don't know. They're not, these are, not everybody's the same. And maybe she's
Yeah.
a wolf that gets along with other freaking animals. So
Exactly.
anyway, those are basically the two thoughts. I wanted to take over to explain that so that you had the most informed decision. I've watched this
Okay.
movie many, many, many times. So
I
it's
can
not fair.
tell.
Yeah, and so it's not fair that I can give such a thoughtful answer. I
Mm-hmm.
want you to have that same playing field. So what do you think about those two things? Like, what did you originally think, and what do you think now?
Mm-hmm. So like that's the thing. So when I watched it twice, I didn't understand how she became a werewolf, because it's just like, well, like, did he scratch her somehow? But then it's like, no, because why would it immediately just happen to her? And how come she's all cool, calm, and collected? And then, like I said, when she pretty much was in her house and saying that she was scared, she heard gunshot, but she changed. You know what I mean? She had her story together. That didn't make any sense. How'd you know how to do that? So then, like I said, at first I was thinking when she was in the hotel room with him, or at his apartment that he was staying at, and the detectives came in and she said, well, he was with me all night, and it was just kind of like, like, how do you know that? Right. But, and I know it's like, oh, maybe she's just saying that, but it's like, she just seemed like their feelings for each other grew super fast.
Yeah.
Like she went from not really wanting to like be with him like that to like, okay, we're together now.
Yeah.
Fiance, and that's just how it was. So what you're saying though makes a lot of sense too, because even when you look at her father, Mr. Allen, all he wanted from Will is for him to be aggressive, to
Yes.
put his
Yes.
foot
I'm so
down
glad
and
you
like,
said that.
Yeah, it had nothing to do like with him personally. So it makes a lot of sense that he would want to see somebody stand up for themselves. And that is very wolf-like. It is very much a part of the pack type of thing. You want people, you want wolves who are strong, a part of the pack. So that's what I was thinking with that. But honestly, I like your theory. I think that that's exactly how it is. I think that she was always a werewolf. And I think that when they kind of connected at the party, it was kind of like she knew that they were going to get together type of thing. But once again, he has to show a backbone. It's just, that makes a lot of sense. And honestly, that just makes me love it even more.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I'm so glad you go. I'm just so glad that you brought up the dad, because I forgot to totally bring that up in my argument. And that's exactly, I was going to say, the dad is looking for the wolf in Will, literally and metaphorically, which this whole movie is about, a mix of literal and metaphor. Exactly. And right there, that's the most of that, because he's looking for the wolf in Will. But I will say, I am happy with either interpretation. I think that makes it just that more interesting of a movie, or have a discussion about it. What do you think versus what I think, or whoever? And I think that there's flaws with both arguments, but there's also supporting evidence for both arguments. And like the doctor guy that Will went to see, for Will, and I think Laura and her father, if they were werewolves the whole time, they needed for Will to bring the wolf out inside of him. That's what the doctor was saying, that everybody has a piece of it within them, but only certain people can actually manifest this. And I think Will proved ultimately that not only he could, but he would do it to save the woman that he loves. Just to wrap it up, I think Wolf is a wonderful werewolf movie, a wonderful movie, horror movie, just movie in general. And I think that people should really check it out if they haven't seen it. People that watched it back in the day, take a new look at it, because it holds up well. It looks beautiful. I watched it streaming on Hulu, and it just looked beautiful. The movie is just as palpable as ever, just as effective, and just as entertaining.
I agree with you. I feel like if you haven't seen this movie, but you watched this whole video for some reason, you should still watch it. If it's been a while for you, I think that you should check it out. And like you said, it's like, it is a horror, it's a werewolf movie, it has some drama, it has some romance. And then again, this was like my first time fully watching it, and it still surprised me. There was some stuff that I didn't see coming, and I love the storyline, I love the performances, I love the cinematography. And it's just, again, like that ending, the way that they went out with a bang. And I really enjoyed this movie.
Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. Thanks for watching. Please let us know, are you a fan of 1994's Wolf? What is your favorite werewolf movie? Do you think that Laura was always a werewolf, or did she become a wolf, just become one at the end? Thank you, Zena Dixon, the Real Queen of Horror, for joining me tonight. You can find Zena over at realqueenofhorror.com, on YouTube under her Real Queen of Horror moniker, or over at Wicked Horror. I'm Justin Steele. You can also find me at Wicked Horror, 401 Pop Culture, or on Twitter at Wicked Horror Justin. Thank you, Zena, so much for talking about Wolf with me.
Thank you. Seriously, I had such a good time.
Ditto, ditto, and we'll see you all soon. Have a good one.